We're gonna rank Rob Zombie's movies. I've been wanting to do this for a while, so let's fucking go for it. It's, I'm using one of those tier lists, so it's gonna be a tier ranking, but it's also kind of gonna function as my worst to best. I figure the best way I'm gonna do this is just starting at the bottom and then going up to the top. So you'll see the rankings we have all the way at the top. We have fucking bitchin'. This is, fantastic. I could watch it anytime. I'd recommend it to anybody. Then we have Righteous. Righteous is really good, one notch below fucking bitchin'. I could also probably watch these anytime. I might not recommend them to anybody. Then right below that we have It's Cool. Quite literally, it's cool. I watch it. I like it. I could watch it most of the time. Right below that we have It's Fine. I watch it less often than the It's Cool ranking. Then all the way at the bottom we have fucking whatever. I really have no desire to watch it more times than I've already seen it. For full disclosure, Rob Zombie is probably my favorite horror director. I am certainly a Rob Zombie nerd. So I think some people might say that I cut some of these movies a bit more slack than most people would. But everyone's got their favorite. Everyone's got their favorite directors. Everyone's got those directors that they go in a little harder for, even on the bad movies. They try a little harder to look for the good things in them. And don't get me wrong, I acknowledge, in my opinion, being a true fan of an artist means you have to acknowledge when they do something that you don't think is good. You see it a lot on the internet nowadays. You see people that are diehards and they almost take it personally when you point out a movie that a director makes that's not very good, or an album that a musician makes that's not very good. And I think that's the responsibility of the true fans, is to point out, this wasn't his best. This wasn't the best. It could have been better, you know. So that's how I am. So, like I said, there are some of his movies where maybe I reach to make them sound a little better than they are. Sometimes I reach to defend, but I certainly will point out the flaws. I think you'll notice both of these as I go through the list. So let me pull this motherfucker back up. Let's pull this motherfucker back up, and I guess let's quit fucking yapping. Let's get to it. So yeah, I'm gonna start from the bottom. We're gonna work our way up to the top. Like I said, this also kind of functions as a worst to best ranking. That's kind of how I'm trying to do it. I was thinking about which order I wanted to do it in, and I think the most interesting way is to go from, from what I consider worst to best, and also bottom tier to top tier at the same time. Once we get into like the top three, top two, it's gonna depend on the day that you ask me. Everyone's got those favorites that there's two. They have two favorites. If you ask them on a Monday, it might be one. If you ask them on a Thursday, it might be the other one. It just kind of depends on which one you've watched more recently. So we'll get there. We'll get there. But all the way at the bottom, here in fucking whatever, I'm going to grab 31. I'm going to put 31 down here in fucking whatever. Man, 31. I always have a lot to say about it when I'm just sitting around thinking. But then when it comes time to talk about it, I have a hard time putting it into words. 31. To me, 31 feels like Rob Zombie's least inspired movie. Obviously, I don't know him, so I can't say this, but 31 to me feels like if a Rob Zombie fan was given a budget to make a movie, and then he made 31. Like, it was somebody who was trying to make a Rob Zombie movie. That's what it looks like to me. That's what it feels like to me. I have this joking mental image of the production of 31 starting off with, I don't know, it's like a Tuesday, and it's 3 p.m. and Rob Zombie's still sleeping. right? He's sleeping. He's not real motivated today. And his manager, somebody from his team comes over and barges into his house and says, "Hey, it's time to make a fucking movie. All right, you got to get up. We got to make a movie." And Rob kind of gets up, half asleep, very grumpy, rubbing his eyes, and says, "Fine, just fucking make a killer clown movie. I don't care." And then the guy leaves, and they start production on 31. That's the most I can say about it. It just seems like his least inspired movie. It's funny because it's kind of a ripoff of House of a Thousand Corpses. Like, he kind of rips himself off multiple times. I mean, it's literally the same. You have people just kind of driving through the back roads and some bad shit happens. And House of a Thousand Corpses was enough of a Texas Chainsaw Massacre ripoff that now he's ripping off the ripoff that he did. I just kind of think he just made it just to make it. I know it was crowdfunded, and I don't think that's usually a great sign. I'm not sure. Obviously, I've never made a movie. I know when you watch interviews with him, he'll tell you that the reason he did the crowdfunding is because he wanted to get the fans involved, and maybe that is true. I have no idea. The cynical side of me would say that just means nobody else would actually fund the movie, so he had to get it funded himself. I don't know. I've seen 31, I think, twice, and I will say that, you know how his movies always come with the documentary, the making of the movie. I enjoyed that 10 times more than the fucking movie itself. It was actually way more entertaining to watch the little documentary that came with the DVD. The DVD that I own, actually. Here's the thing, I own all of Rob Zombie's filmography. I've DVDs, Blu-rays. I have multiple copies of the Firefly trilogy. It's kind of ridiculous. Eventually, I'll make a video, pull out all my physical media and whatnot. But 31, I only have 31 on DVD because I had a thing with a girl for a short time, and she just so happened to own it on DVD, and she just let me have it. I would have purchased it on my own just to complete my collection. Don't get me wrong. But the only reason I have it is because this girl gave it to me. Oh, I should have mentioned this way sooner. Now that I'm about 7 minutes and 45 seconds into this video, I'm not doing El Super Bisto. We're not doing El Super Bisto. I like El Super Bisto. I think it's a very funny kind of outlier of his filmography. I enjoy it. I've watched it a handful of times. I also have that on DVD. But we're just doing the live action films. We're just doing the films, right? We don't want to overcomplicate things. We got 8 movies right here, so this is perfect. 31, yeah, it's just not my favorite. It's just not my favorite, and that hurts me to say. Like I said at the beginning, big Rob Zombie fan. I really like pretty much everything he's done. I love White Zombie, his solo music, love the films. I just wasn't feeling 31. It was fucking whatever to me. So 31 is the only film that is in the fucking whatever category. Everything else is going to be higher than that. So that's the good news, is that we're done. We're done here in the bottom territory. So moving on, this is kind of going to be a movie that you're going to notice that I kind of start maybe reaching to defend a little bit more than some people would. But we're going to put The Munsters in the it's fine category. The Munsters was fine. A lot of people hated The Munsters. I think it's fine. I have it. I got the Blu-ray. I've watched it a couple times. It's fine. If I ever was with some friends and the movie came up, I would have no problem watching it with them. If it was Halloween and I was hanging out with a girlfriend or something and we were going to make out on the couch, I'd put on The Munsters. It's fine. It's a fine movie. It's fine. Pros and cons. The pros and cons of The Munsters. Oh, we'll start with the pros. There's definitely more cons than pros. All right, this is where my honesty that is a result of being a true fan comes into play. The pros, it looks cool. That's been one thing that everyone has kind of agreed on. And it looks cool. It's colorful. It's bright. The lighting is cool. It looks fucking cool. It looks kind of Giallo-ish with the colors and whatnot. It's cool. It's an entertaining looking movie, right? Daniel Roebuck. That's been a big one that a lot of people have agreed on too. Daniel Roebuck. Daniel Roebuck did a great job as Grandpa. I know he's the Count in this movie, but it's Grandpa. All the Munsters fans, we know it's Grandpa. Daniel Roebuck, he is the best part of this movie. So the pros are really the look of the movie, the physical appearance and the aesthetic, and Daniel Roebuck. Now the cons, we get to the cons. The cons are pretty important, and that's really what stops this movie from breaking up into its cool category. The first con is the comedy. It's really not funny. And the thing is, Rob Zombie's a funny guy, right? I just talked about El Superbeasto. The Haunted World of El Superbeasto, very funny. House of a Thousand Corpses, The Devil's Rejects, they've all got some very funny parts in them, right? There's some genuine laughter to be had in those movies. But those are R-rated movies. This is the thing. I think Rob Zombie's funny in an R-rated context. When it comes to PG, family-friendly, I think he could have used some help. This is what I've been saying. He should have hired a comedy writer. I think if he hires a family-friendly comedy writer, it becomes a much funnier movie. That's what he needed help with, was the comedy writing. He needed help writing a family-friendly comedy film, because this wasn't it. The other big con for it is the story, is the plot. And so, like, here's the thing about comedy movies. If you show me a comedy movie, if the story is terrible and I'm not engaged, but the movie is funny and I'm laughing the whole time, I can forgive the bad story. And you can reverse those. If the movie is not funny and I'm not laughing at all, but the story is great and I'm engaged the entire time, I can forgive the lack of comedy. But this movie is lacking in both of those departments, and those are the two most important parts of a comedy movie. That's what you have, the comedy and the story. So that's where this movie fails. This next part also hurts to say. I'm not a big fan of Sherry Moon's performance in this. I'm a Sherry Moon defender through and through, right? You'll see this as we get further into the filmography. I like Sherry Moon Zombie. I'm fine with her. I think she gets way too much hate. I think her being in all of Rob's movies is kind of sweet and endearing, to be honest. I think it's kind of sweet to see these two lovebirds pretty much unable to work without each other. And I don't think she's that bad. I don't think she's generally that bad. I think she's fine. In this movie, she's not that great. I think she kind of misunderstood the assignment. That's what I would say. You can tell she watched a lot of Munsters episodes to prepare for this movie. And you can tell she watched Lily in every episode. I'm sure she was laser focused in on watching Lily Munster. And she just seemed to misunderstand the assignment. She dove headfirst into that, that black and white, old, classic 1960s acting. And she kind of overdid it. I mean, she definitely overdid it. See, the thing about Lily Munster, the thing about, Yvonne DiCarlo? The thing about Yvonne DiCarlo is that she didn't constantly do the classic. She didn't constantly do the classic 1960s acting. Like she was believable as a human. She was, or I guess you can't really say a human, but she was believable as a person. I'm starting to ramble here. Sherry Moon's performance made it look like she was spoofing the character of Lily. It kind of came off as satirical, like she was like a spoof. Like it was kind of the performance I would expect to see in a spoof of the Munsters, not a reenactment of the Munsters. I mean, I know she wasn't making fun of the Munsters or making fun of Yvonne De Carlo or Lily Munster, but that's kind of what it seemed like. That's kind of what it appeared to be. And I know that's not what she was trying to do. So that is a con. Unfortunately, Sherry Moon's performance is a con. And Jeff Daniel Phillips, his performance is a con. That just was not the right Herman Munster. He just wasn't. Jeff Daniel Phillips, I am not really one way or the other. Sometimes I like him, sometimes I don't. I'll be entirely honest. I'm not always a fan of him as like a lead character. I don't think he has that quality of the star of the movie. And by all means, I know the Munsters is about the family, but Herman is the patriarch of the family. He is kind of if you were gonna pick one star of the Munsters, it's Herman. Right now, I have it pulled up. I googled the Munsters, the sitcom, and in the cast list, the first cast member that comes up is Fred Gwynn as Herman Munster. He is the star of the show, if there is one. And Jeff Daniel Phillips just wasn't that guy. He just wasn't that guy. I didn't need, we don't need a carbon copy of Fred Gwynn. I think Daniel Roebuck did a really good job at kind of channeling a little bit of Al Lewis, but also being himself. And Jeff Daniel Phillips just didn't pull that off. He just didn't pull it off. I don't have the advice. I don't know what I would have had him do differently. I don't know if he could have done anything differently. It just didn't really satisfy me. It just really didn't satisfy me. So those are definitely some cons. A little bit of reaching where I try to defend the Munsters is, when you buy the Blu-ray, again, you get the documentary. You get the making of the movie. And I feel like I noticed anyways, in my opinion, it kind of seems like the production and the shooting circumstances weren't necessarily ideal. I think this was the first movie that Rob Zombie made overseas. I know it was made, I think, somewhere in Europe. I can never remember exactly what country it was. But he outright talks about there being a language barrier between him and most of the crew working on the film. And, you can work with that, obviously. There's, nothing wrong with a language barrier. But I think when you're trying to make a movie, I would imagine that gets in the way sometimes. I would imagine that has an effect on some things. And there's a part in this documentary where Rob outright says they're going to shoot a scene. And Rob just straight up says, let's just shoot it. It's not going to get any better than that. And that's not a good sign. If you're making a movie and your director is yelling, fuck it, it's not going to get any better than that. Let's just fucking shoot it. That's not usually a great sign. That's not usually a sign that the movie is going swimmingly. I think he kind of took less than ideal circumstances because it was the Munsters, and this has been a lifelong dream of his. There's no way the budget of this movie was very high. What was this? It was that Universal 1440. Let's check this out. Yeah, Universal 1440, which I'm pretty sure is their home video distribution division. It's basically, that's where they throw all their cheap movies, where they go direct to streaming or direct to, So there's no way he had much budget to work with, which I think he's used to at this point. Though, the last half of his career has been low budget movies. But I cut him a little slack on that part. I don't think the production was ideal, at least from what I see in that documentary. So that's where I will reach and defend a little bit. It's fine. It's a fine movie. It's not the worst thing I've ever seen. It's certainly not as fucking whatever as 31. I will say that. So I guess now we're moving on. This next one, I had a really hard time choosing whether I wanted to put it in the it's fine category or the it's cool category. And Look, this could go either way. Again, I could watch this movie tomorrow and decide to bump it up to It's Cool. So keep that in mind. I'm going to put it in the It's Fine category for now. But, oh yeah, man, this is a tough one. Fuck it, I'm just going to do it. We're going to put Three from Hell in the It's Fine category. Three from Hell is fine. It's fine. Look, Three from Hell, I defend a lot. I like Three from Hell. I like Three from Hell more than The Munsters. Let's get that clear. If there was a spot in between fine and cool, that's where I would put Three from Hell. Okay. Three from Hell, first and foremost, let me just say, I'm very interested and curious about that original script with Sid Haig. I would imagine all Rob Zombie fans are. We know he had a whole script written with Otis and Baby and Spalding. And then obviously Sid Haig was not able to make a full movie. So we had to change the entire script, it sounds like, in a couple days, and basically write in someone else. And that's how we get Foxy, played by, oh, I'm going to feel stupid. I can't remember his fucking name. Played by Richard Brake. Yeah, duh, no shit. Richard Brake was good in that movie, but, being honest, Foxy is basically it's just Otis. It's just another version of Otis. It's kind of a combination of Spalding and Otis, more so leaning toward Otis. With Three from Hell, I have a lot of what I call wish list items, things that I wish would have happened. I wish Three from Hell would have just been a prison movie. Am I not right? Or are you not already agreeing with me? Imagine a full movie of just Otis and Baby in prison. Maybe Otis gets into some beef with another inmate. Maybe Otis shanks the guy in the shower one day and he gets in trouble. And I mean, come on, that would be great. An entire prison movie. I'm talking about the 1970s prison films, right? The women in prison movies, shit like that. We really could have gone all in on the prison, because that's the best part of Three from Hell. The best part of Three from Hell is the beginning part. We also could have got a lot of more trial footage. I love courtroom movies, courtroom drama, because Otis commits some other crime in prison, gets brought back into court. We get to see more of Otis on trial. Baby, we get to see more of Baby in prison and on trial. We did get the most of Baby in prison. And this also hurts to say, because Sherry Moon as Baby is, I think, her best role when it comes to House of a Thousand Corpses and The Devil's Rejects. I think so much time had passed between The Devil's Rejects and Three from Hell that Sherry kind of forgot how to play Baby. Oh, man. Yeah, it hurts to say. It hurts to say. Like I said, I'm always a big Sherry Moon defender. God, my worst nightmare is thinking about how if somehow, like, Rob Zombie and Sherry Moon Zombie were to see this video and see me saying all this stuff, I'd be devastated. But man, look, she's not great in this movie. She's not. And it's kind of the same thing as The Munsters, where it seems like she's playing a spoof. Like, remember those early 2000s movies, Scary Movie? They were kind of just big spoofs on the Scream franchise and various other horror movies. That's kind of what this feels like. This feels like Sherry Moon is spoofing Baby. It's just not the same, It's also, I was very bummed out that we didn't get much of the, because it starts off, there's kind of a focus on how Baby is kind of losing her mind, right? When I first saw this movie and they were hinting at, Baby is kind of losing her mind and she's starting arguments with Otis and Foxy, I thought we were going to go to, like, Baby was going to run off. That's what I thought was going to happen. I thought after the hotel scene where Baby kills the guy, I thought she was going to kill this guy and then run off or something. I thought, when Otis and Foxy are in the hotel room and they're saying, hey, she's been gone for more than 10 minutes. What's she doing? I thought they were going to go try to find her and she was going to be gone. And that's where the movie was going to go. Baby took off and is kind of doing her own thing. And Otis and Foxy have to track her down. we got these hints of Baby's kind of losing her mind, and she's kind of, they get into that argument where she says she's the fucking star of the show, and she's constantly butting heads with Otis, but then it just kind of goes nowhere. Just kind of nothing happens. And that's a similar thing. I forgot to say this about the Munsters. Let's put the Munsters and Three from Hell together a little bit more. In the Munsters, the movie was kind of promoted as a feud between Grandpa and Herman. And in the movie, there was definitely hints of that. They talked a little bit of shit to each other. You could see that there was tension, but then it kind of just went nowhere. It kind of just fizzled out. And that's what happens in Three from Hell with the whole Baby losing her mind angle. It kind of just goes nowhere. A couple other cons, which I think are out of Rob Zombie's control. I think it was, they talked about it in the documentary, in the making of. It was digitally shot, and they tried to, edit, customize it, edit it, whatever you call it, to make it look like it was shot on film. And they did a good job, but it certainly didn't look like House of a Thousand Corpses or The Devil's Rejects. It didn't have the same feel that you want with, not necessarily in a Rob Zombie film. It's fine if he's shooting on digital, but when you see the Firefly family, you're looking for that grit. And it just wasn't quite as gritty. The prison stuff honestly looked a little bit grittier. That's kind of why I was hoping it was going to be a prison movie, because the prison stuff looked, maybe it was just the lighting in the prison or whatever. But yeah, anyways, the baby Firefly stuff, it just kind of fizzled out and went nowhere. I see a lot of people saying it's basically a carbon copy of The Devil's Rejects. It's kind of the same story. And yeah, it certainly turns out to be kind of the same story. I like the idea of them in Mexico. I thought that was interesting, have them flee the country. They get into trouble in Mexico. That was cool. I liked the characters in Mexico. Oh God, what were they called? It was like the something Satans. Yeah, the Black Satans. I liked that. They had a gang that wears luchador masks. That is very Rob Zombie. Something you wouldn't imagine that he would put in there, but then sure enough, we got fucking luchadors that are like gangs and criminals. That was cool. I liked that part. That was cool. But as far, yeah, it's mostly the baby stuff. That's mostly my complaint with Three from Hell. And like I said, the fact that Foxy is basically just Otis Part 2. And there are good things about Three from Hell, don't get me wrong. I love Otis's kind of character arc. Maybe not character arc, his progression, I guess. His progression in Three from Hell, I liked it. In Three from Hell, we get this very laid-back version of Otis. It seems like he's already been in prison. I'll talk about this when we get to The Devil's Rejects, but in The Devil's Rejects, Otis is on the run. He's not been to prison yet that we know of. And he's very angry the whole time because he's determined. He's on a mission. But in Three from Hell, it seems like he's thinking, he's already been in prison for however many years. So yeah, he's on the run. He would like to stay out of prison, but if he gets caught and goes back to prison, he's probably thinking, big deal. I've fucking done it before. So I liked it in Three from Hell. We get this kind of laid back Otis. We see him laying in bed in the fucking hotel room watching TV. Like he's literally just hanging out. That part's kind of cool. That part is interesting. I did like that. I like Otis's progression. Otis's character progression throughout all three movies is honestly one of my favorite parts. Sid Haig, of course, being a huge standout. That one little scene he had was perfect. And I thought the way that Sid Haig went out was honestly pretty good in this movie. He was executed. He was the first guy to get the lethal injection. Yeah, that made sense. He was the oldest. They got to make sure they take him out first. It was a sad, and of course we didn't want a movie without Captain Spaulding, but that's just the cards that Rob Zombie and us were all dealt. So that's fine. It was the best way it could have been. Foxy, yeah, I'm almost curious if I would have liked it without Foxy better. I think Rob talked about how he considered doing a Two from Hell. When he discovered that Sid Haig was not going to be able to do the movie, he considered doing a Two from Hell. Just Otis and Baby. Which I mean, actually, yeah, I guess that's kind of what I'm saying I wanted when I wanted just the prison movie. I just wanted Otis and Baby in prison the whole time. I would imagine that would have been a pretty low budget deal too. Again, I don't know, I don't make movies, but I would imagine if you're doing an entire movie in one setting, one location, that cuts down on the budget. So I don't know. I feel like they could have done it. I definitely think they could have done it. And it just, I just think it would have been so much better. Just Rob Zombie doing a 1970s style prison film. Yeah, that would have been great. I don't know why they didn't do that. I don't know why they didn't do that. We didn't need to break them out of prison. We could have just left them in prison and seen what happens. That's all we needed. That's all I wanted from Three from Hell was just them in prison. What are they doing in prison? Who is Otis getting into problems with? Who is Baby getting into fights with? And we got a little bit of that. Baby's parts in prison. For the bit that I've complained about Sherry Moon, I did like Baby's. You know, she gets into like weird problems with the lesbian prison guard. Like, yeah, that stuff was actually pretty interesting. I liked seeing that. I liked seeing that even in a world full of women, Baby is still able to use her sexuality and her good looks to her advantage. Even in a world full of women, Baby is able to play the same tricks that she's been playing for the first two movies. So yeah, I will say that is a pro. That is certainly one of the pros, was Baby's parts in prison. The movie did feel a little awkward when it came to the time period. You know, obviously this movie takes place in the 80s, but it pretty much just looked like a movie that took place in the 70s. I think the only thing we really got to show us that it was the 80s was that Ronald Reagan picture in the, I think it was in Baby's parole hearing. There's just a Ronald Reagan portrait hanging up on the wall. Other than that, the entire movie was, of course, very 70s, but the soundtrack, of course, was great. That's something I forgot to mention in 31. I will throw that in there. That is the one pro of 31. You get Walk Away by James Gang for the opening credits. Almost kind of a bummer that, because that's my favorite James Gang song. Kind of a bummer that that song gets used in 31. I wish it was used in a better movie, but it is a pro nonetheless. James Gang, always great. Joe Walsh James Gang is, of course, real James Gang and the best James Gang, but I do like that Rob showed some love for the post Joe Walsh era James Gang. In Three from Hell, we got Ride the Wind. I think it's Ride the Wind, right? That's what it's called. Yeah, Ride the Wind. We get Ride the Wind by James Gang in Three from Hell. Very good song. Very, very good song. So, yeah. That's it for It's Fine. We get the Monsters and we get Three from Hell. Now we're moving on to It's Cool. And for It's Cool is Lords of Salem. The Lords of Salem. I have a strange relationship with the Lords of Salem. The Lords of Salem was one of those movies that it took me a few tries to get. The first time I watched it, I didn't like it. I didn't like it at all. The second time I watched it, well, let me back up. I watched it the first time, I didn't like it, but there was kind of something about it. You know those movies that you watch, you don't like, but there's kind of something about them that you're just like, you know, I kind of want to watch it again. It just kind of sits in your head. You're not really sure what's going on. You don't know why you're thinking about it, but you're thinking about it. So then you watch it again. And I was like, okay, you know, this movie looks cool. It looks really cool. That is kind of a common thread with all of Rob Zombie's movies, at the very least. They all look very cool. He knows how to put cool shit on screen. I think even his biggest I hate using the word haters. His biggest haters, but you know, even the people that dislike him very strongly, I think have to admit, at the very least, there's always some cool shit on screen in his movies. And Lords of Salem looks very cool. It looks good. It's an outlier. To me, it is certainly the outlier of his filmography. Some people might say The Munsters because it's a family-friendly comedy, but The Munsters, you know, if you know Rob Zombie's history with The Munsters, I don't consider it an outlier. To me, Lords of Salem is the outlier because it's a straight-up horror movie and it's a supernatural witch movie. You know, it's not a gritty 1970s violent gore fest. It's not a grindhouse movie. It's not a drive-in movie. It's kind of a classy supernatural movie. So I watched it for the second time, and I it kind of grew on me a little bit. I thought there's something here. After I watched it the second time, that's when I started watching. I love to watch interviews with my favorite artists. I'm a big nerd when it comes to the people I like. I've watched every Rob Zombie interview I can find. It actually becomes a hassle because I've watched so many interviews of him going back to the 90s that I start losing track of like sources. So I'll quote people as saying things, but I can't remember when or where I heard it. But I do remember in interviews with him around this time, he was talking about how the film was inspired by Suspiria by Dario Argento and Rosemary's Baby by Roman Polanski. And once I heard him say that, it all kind of clicked for me immediately. I thought, oh, I need to watch this again. Just, remember Suspiria and then watch. That's my advice to everyone. If you're in the same position that I was in, which I think is a very common position. I see this a lot in like Rob Zombie Facebook groups and on subreddits that people watch the Lords of Salem and they don't dislike it, but they're just kind of thrown off by it and they don't really know what to think. I will always tell those people, go watch Suspiria by Dario Argento and then go watch Lords of Salem, and I think you'll totally get it. He even mentions in one interview, it's like the plot is kind of the second most important part. It's not the top priority, which is, I was, kind of glad that he was honest about that. Because that was one of my complaints with it was the story is kind of lame. A haunted record shows up to a radio station and then this girl is haunted. But then when he talked about how, it's a simple plot, it's a simple story, and it's an atmospheric movie, it kind of takes you to another place. I watched it again and was like, oh, like, I like this movie. He definitely accomplished the goal that he set out. And that's not to say anything bad about the story. I don't want to talk down on the plot. Although I will say, if you haven't read the book, I have the book on audio, and I listened to it, and I realized once you listen or read the book, it gets into a lot more detail. It makes a lot more sense. Obviously, for budget reasons, Lords of Salem, the movie was cut down pretty significantly from his original ideas. But yeah, no, it's not to say anything bad about the story. It's just once you kind of prioritize, once you get the priorities straight, it starts making more sense. It's a very, it's an atmospheric, kind of hypnotic movie. I certainly have complaints, don't get me wrong. My biggest complaint in Lords of Salem is with Heidi, the main character. She just kind of does nothing. She doesn't do anything. So here's what I'm saying. If I was, I don't know, working at a radio station and a record just kind of appeared out of nowhere and I listened to it and I felt sick and, exhausted and weird like she does, first of all, I'd go to the fucking doctor. Like, wouldn't you do something? Wouldn't you be like, oh, it's very strange that I'm having a reaction to music or a record? I'm gonna go to the fucking doctor and see if there's something wrong with me. Heidi doesn't really do that. She doesn't go to the doctor. She doesn't go to, I don't know, like the police at any point. Like she doesn't do anything. She just, oh, I feel like shit. Time to go to work. That was my biggest complaint about the movie, and that's really honestly probably my only complaint about the movie. Sherry Moon does a really good job in this movie because I think the role was very obviously written for her, with her in mind. This was completely original. He wrote this character entirely with Sherry in mind. This is also really the first movie where Sherry Moon takes the starring lead. For how many people complain about Sherry Moon being the star in all of his movies, she's not the star in any of the first 4 movies. In, the movies that we still have left, Corpses, Rejects, Halloween, and Halloween 2, she's not the star of those movies. Halloween and Halloween 2, she's really barely in. And then Corpses and Rejects, she's the third starring, and you could not even argue one of my hottest takes. I also hate saying hot takes. One of my biggest hot takes in House of a Thousand Corpses is that Karen Black is actually the star of the movie. We'll get to that. We will get to that. But yeah, The Lords of Salem is the first movie where Sherry Moon takes over as the star, and she continues being the star in the rest of his movies. Even here in Three from Hell, she gets top billing, and you can see on the cover art, she is in the middle of the three walking. She has certainly taken over as the star in Lords of Salem. And I have kind of theories about that. I think of Halloween and Halloween 2 as kind of the end of his mainstream aspirations and the end of his major studio budgets, kind of sad. It's kind of a sad story, him getting into working with the Weinsteins and how that kind of, I don't want to say breaks his spirit, but and I'll get into all this stuff as I continue on, but I have that book. There's a book, I think it's called House of Rejects. It's written by a guy who writes a lot of books about the productions and the stories of horror films, and it's a book about the productions of House of a Thousand Corpses, Devil's Rejects, and Three from Hell. And you can find it on Amazon, by the way, House of Rejects. I would recommend that for anyone who's, into Rob Zombie's films, specifically the Firefly trilogy. And in the book, there's a quote from Rob Zombie's manager, his longtime manager. I can never remember the guy's name. I think it's Andy Gould. It's either, Andy Gould or Andy Gould. He was, Rob Zombie's manager throughout most of his career. He's not now. I think the last movie of his he produced was 31, actually. Yeah, after 31, it looks like they parted ways. But even back in the music days, Andy Gould, he's known him for a long time. Anyways, in the book, Andy Gould, the book quotes an interview from Andy Gould where he says that when he met Rob Zombie, even back in the White Zombie days, I think it was, Rob Zombie told him, I would like to win an Oscar. At one time, Rob Zombie had Oscar award-winning aspirations. He said he wanted to take his experience from shooting music videos and start shooting horror movies, and then move from horror into a more mainstream genre where he could potentially win an Oscar. And after Halloween 2, that seems to not really be his aspiration anymore. Lords of Salem is certainly not winning any Oscars. 31 is certainly not winning any Oscars. So I think after Halloween 2, he kind of starts focusing more on just artistic freedom, creative freedom. And when you prioritize those things, you're going to sacrifice budget in a lot of cases. And I think because of that, that's when we start getting, the same cast every movie. That's when we start getting Sherry Moon and Jeff Daniel Phillips in starring roles in every single movie because it's affordable. And of course, because they're all friends and they all get along. I think he very clearly likes working with people that he likes to hang out with. But, Lords of Salem is really, to me, there's a fat, bold line in between Halloween 2 and Lords of Salem. The first 4 movies, he's kind of on his way up. And then the next 4 movies, he's not on his way down, I wouldn't say, but he's certainly not making movies with dimension anymore, or any studio even of that size. It's just, Lords of Salem is it's the first movie after that fat, bold line where things changed. But I like Lords of Salem. After that long rant, after me rambling for a while, I have to make a video. I have to do a video where I actually write out a script and talk about Rob Zombie's filmography. This is just something I'm doing on a Friday night because I got nothing better to do. Lords of Salem is cool. I can pretty much watch Lords of Salem anytime. I would recommend it to a lot of people. If, anyone who's curious about, I guess you wouldn't recommend it to people who are curious about Rob Zombie's movies because it's the outlier of his career, but you could think of cases where you would recommend it to people. It's a cool movie. like I said, I have complaints. But the pros, you really can't beat that atmosphere that he brings to the movie. It's a very interesting movie, and it's cool. It's a witch movie. You know, witch movies are cool. Any movie that's about witches, I'm down for. I'm down for witches. I'm down for Dee Wallace being a witch. It's an interesting movie. One of the biggest bummer to me actually is there's no making of documentary with it. That would have been a movie. I'd be interested to see the documentary. It's funny, the 3 films in his filmography that don't have a making of documentary are the 3 films I think would be the most interesting. And we have 2 of those that are still waiting to be assigned to a tier. I'll get to those. But in Lords of Salem, I think it'd be very interesting to see like a full hour to 2-hour long documentary about the production of the film, just because of how different it is. You know, it'd be cool to see Rob Zombie, you know, obviously working outside of his comfort zone. You know, I would say this movie was certainly outside of his comfort zone. He talks about in his interviews how when he made this movie, he kind of just did the opposite of what he would have usually done in every other movie. So I think it would have been very interesting to see a full, 2-hour length documentary about the production of the film. But we don't get one. We don't have one, and that's all right. We have the director's commentary, which I haven't watched in a while. But it's a cool movie. It's a cool movie. I like The Lords of Salem. So that is the only movie in the It's Cool category, which means we are moving on to the final 4. I'm sure you've already noticed that the best movies are the first 4 of his filmography, and the not best movies are the second 4 of his filmography. But now we move on to the righteous category, and in the righteous category, we have motherfucking Halloween. Halloween is righteous. I really like his Halloween. His Halloween is the first Halloween movie I ever saw. So I will acknowledge there is probably some nostalgia that is playing a role in my love of Rob Zombie's Halloween. It's actually one of the first horror movies I ever really sat down and watched. I was kind of late getting into horror movies. You know, a lot of people talk about they started watching horror movies when they were 5 years old and they've loved it ever since. Halloween, I saw, it was either in like the summer between 8th grade and freshman year, or maybe sometime during freshman year. You know, it was around that time. And it's really the first horror film that I ever sat down with 2 friends and watched, front to back, paying complete attention to it. I remember thinking, like, I can't believe this is fucking legal for people to watch. I was a Christian school kid up until middle school. So keep in mind, I had not really been, I don't want to say exposed to these things. I was always a true crime nerd, which is kind of funny to imagine that. I grew up not really allowed to watch horror movies, but I would also kind of sneak watch those A&E true crime documentaries when my mom was watching them while folding laundry and stuff. I've always been attracted to the darker things. But I was certainly into true crime before I ever got into horror. But this was one of the first horror movies that I really sat down and dug into. And I just remember, it's obviously a Rob Zombie movie is a pretty intense movie to be your first horror movie. And yeah, I just remember thinking, holy shit, like this is fucking crazy. Like, people watch this stuff for fun. I really like it. I really like it. I understand people's complaints. So the people that usually complain the most about this movie are diehard Halloween fans. They're the fans of the original Halloween. They hold that up as the holy grail, really, in all of horror. I always say there are 2 kinds of horror fans. There are those who say that Halloween is the greatest horror film of all time. There are those who say that Texas Chainsaw Massacre is the greatest horror film of all time. I say that Texas Chainsaw Massacre is the greatest horror film of all time. And maybe that has a little bit to do with why I love Rob Zombie's filmography. Halloween, to me, it's just cool. That's always what I end up saying about Rob Zombie's movies. They're just cool. It's just cool. I'll get my one complaint out of the way first. I will say that Michael's upbringing, Michael's childhood is very stock. It is very cliche and kind of stereotypical. It kind of makes you think that, Rob Zombie was watching one of those hour-long A&E true crime documentaries, and he just kind of copy and pasted the, oh, abusive childhood, no father figure, mother was a stripper, he was bullied in school, bad life at home. And then he took that and put it to Michael Myers. I understand that. I will say that he could have been a little bit more creative when it came to Michael's upbringing. It was a very standard stock kind of by the books upbringing for a serial killer. Other than that, yeah, I like it. I really like it. Some people say that there's no mystery. They say that he took away Michael's motive. Or no, it's not that he took away Michael's motive. It's that he gave Michael a motive. Everyone likes the original because you don't know anything about Michael Myers. And I get that. Sometimes I don't like that as people's argument because generally in movies, when you don't learn anything about the villain, those same people will complain and say, we don't know anything about him. We don't know any of his motive. Halloween is the only movie where people use the argument that we don't want to know his motive. Generally, you want to know the character's motives and what is driving them. But to me, the mystery in Halloween is, yes, we know that his motive is to find his sister, but we don't know why he wants to find his sister. To me, that's kind of the mystery that's put into Rob Zombie's Halloween. If Michael Myers was to capture Laurie in his arms, what is he going to do? Is he going to kill her, or is he going to, be nice to her? We get that one scene where he does capture her and they're in the house and he takes off his mask. But you still don't really know, had we seen that situation to completion, would he have killed her, or would he have, I don't know, like taken her in? Like what that's the mystery of it. What does he want with Laurie? And I like the idea that Laurie doesn't know that she's related to Michael. I know people complain about, some people will say that they don't like the brother sister angle. Even Quentin Tarantino says that he doesn't like thinking about Michael as Laurie's brother. I like it. I can't lie. I'm down with it. I've always been down with the Michael and Laurie being brother and sister. I've always been totally fine with it. I know some people don't. That's not their thing. But I do like that Rob Zombie was very, foot in the sand. He was firm. I'm going with the brother sister angle. We're not fucking around. We're not doing a are they, aren't they? They're brother and sister. That's the story he went with, and he stuck to it, and I like that. So yeah, I think it's a good take. I like the Dr. Loomis character. We'll get into Halloween 2. That's gonna be my craziest take, the Halloween 2. I do want to make a whole video eventually on Rob Zombie's Halloween 2. That's the take that people are gonna think I'm the craziest for. We'll get to it. But I like Dr. Loomis's character. Malcolm McDowell did a great job. I like that we bring back Daniel Harris. I like, God, I can never remember anybody's names as soon as I'm recording. Brad Dourif. Yeah, Brad Dourif. Of course, his performance in both of the Halloween movies I love. A lot of people praise him for his performance in Halloween 2, but I think even in just the first Halloween, he was great. So yeah, I don't have many complaints about Halloween. I'm a big fan of Rob Zombie's Halloween. I think people put too much blame on Rob Zombie. Let me explain that. So, people that like Halloween, Halloween is the original Halloween. It's a very kind of graceful film. It's not violent. It's not gory. It's not gritty. It's kind of a, Michael Myers is the not supernatural, but even John Carpenter has called him a force of nature, force of evil, something like that. And I think the Weinsteins, I blame them. To me, imagine, as much as I love Rob Zombie's Halloween, if I was one of the Weinsteins and I was in charge of Halloween and I was looking for a director, I couldn't imagine watching The Devil's Rejects and then saying, that's the guy we're going to get to make our Halloween movie. That's crazy to me. Rob Zombie does what Rob Zombie does. To me, it's as simple as that. You know, it's like putting, I don't know, it's like putting a steak in front of a dog and expecting him not to eat it. Like, of course, Rob Zombie's going to make a gritty, violent, gory Halloween movie because that's what he does. What do you expect from him? To me, that blame should be placed on the Weinsteins, all the people that say Rob Zombie took Halloween and kind of trashed it up. You know, oh, it's trashy. Everybody cusses a lot. That's what he does. You know, you don't watch The Devil's Rejects and think that Rob Zombie's going to make a graceful, nice Halloween movie. That's not what's going to happen. You know that's not what's going to happen. I place that blame on the Weinsteins. More people need to blame the Weinsteins. Rob Zombie does what he does, and that's just the way it is. I think another complaint I always see, this will be my last thing about Halloween, and I think it's so silly. Everybody will say, oh, Rob Zombie didn't understand Michael Myers. Rob Zombie doesn't understand Michael Myers. What are you talking about? Michael Myers, people act like Michael Myers is like fucking rocket science, like he's a fucking equation. Dude, my 14-year-old sister understands Michael Myers. It's a guy in a mask who we know nothing about. He's a force of nature. You know, he's a force of evil. He is evil personified. We don't know anything about him. He doesn't talk. We don't know why he's there. We don't know what he's doing. It's not that complicated. It's really not that complicated. It's not that Rob Zombie doesn't understand Michael Myers. It's that Rob Zombie didn't want to give us John Carpenter's Michael Myers all over again. That's all that is. And if he did give us John Carpenter's Michael Myers, people would be complaining that he didn't make Michael Myers, you know, his own version. Because that's the thing. Those same people that claim Rob Zombie doesn't understand Michael Myers, they'll complain about the whole first half of the movie. Or no, they'll complain about the whole second half of the movie and say that it's basically just a carbon copy of the original Halloween. It's like, so, you know, you're kind of damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. You're supposed to make it your own, but you're also supposed to make it different. But you're supposed to respect the original, but you're supposed to make your own original. It's silly. It's silly to think that Rob Zombie does not understand Michael Myers. Everybody understands Michael Myers. You're not a genius because you understand Michael Myers. Every horror fan who pays attention understands Michael Myers. It's, you know, like I said, it's not fucking rocket science. He just made his own version of Michael Myers. And I like his version of Michael Myers. I like that he was big. I like that he was, you know, and the fact that he made him so big, that's another complaint. Okay, sorry, that last one wasn't the last thing. I've got some more ranting. Everyone complains about how he's too big. He's too big. He's too hulking and big, and that was never the original Michael Myers. Well, to me, he did that out of love and respect. You hear him in interviews talk about this. He says, Michael Myers, the last time we saw Michael Myers before Rob Zombie got his hands on him, Michael Myers was getting karate kicked by Busta fucking Rhymes. Michael Myers was a joke. Michael Myers was not scary. Rob Zombie made him huge to put some respect back on his name. He said, I'm going to take this classic slasher icon. I'm going to make him scary again. I'm going to make little kids have nightmares again. This is going to be a scary motherfucker. So maybe you don't like the big Michael Myers, but you have to understand that it was done out of respect and admiration for the character. That's my take on that. That's my take on Halloween. I like Rob Zombie's version of Halloween. Okay, I just do. I just fucking do. If you don't, that's fine. That's cool. But you have to update some of your complaints. That's all I'm saying. Some of your complaints are old and tired and they're overused. It's not that he doesn't understand Michael Myers. It's not that he made him big and scary because he doesn't like Michael Myers. It gets tired. It gets tiring. I would also eventually like to to make full-length videos on this Halloween movie too, because there's a lot of complaints. You know, a lot of the general standard complaints to see about Rob's Halloween movies that I think are pretty easy to kind of push back against, and not tell people that they're wrong, but just tell people that, you know, you should think about this or think about that before you come out with that argument. Fuck it. Let's move on to fucking bitching. We're at the top tier now. I'm sure you see the last 3 movies, and I'm sure you're surprised about it. One of them. I'm sure you're surprised about one of them. But before we get to it, we're taking the fucking Devil's Rejects, and we're putting it in fucking bitchin'. I mean, the Devil's Rejects is awesome. I think that's probably the least polarizing thing I'll say in this video. Everybody likes the Devil's Rejects. Even people that don't like Rob Zombie like the Devil's Rejects. It's a good film. I think it's kind of undeniably a good film. You know, everybody talks about how Rob kind of makes you fall in love with these very terrible people. And that's true. That is the strongest thing about this movie. It's actually crazy to the degree to like how true that is. I don't think people realize, you watch Otis Driftwood rape a woman. You watch Otis Driftwood rape a woman. That's, by all means, that's what happens at gunpoint in front of her husband. And within like 15 or 20 minutes, we move to Otis and Spalding and Baby arguing about Tutti Frutti ice cream. And you're kind of laughing and you're having fun and you're on their side. You hope that Otis gives Baby her ice cream. I don't think people realize like how close those scenes are together. I don't think people realize how close those are. I didn't realize it until recently. It's crazy. It's actually very crazy how quickly he kind of changes your opinion on these characters. And then, you know, once the movie is over, you think, oh, wait a minute. Like, no, I don't know. Otis is a terrible fucking person, you know? It's a very well-written movie. One of the things that I think is funny is that everybody loves to call out House of a Thousand Corpses as a Texas Chainsaw Massacre ripoff. But I never see anybody talk about how the Devil's Rejects is a Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 ripoff. This is going to sound like I'm talking shit, but I'm not. This is just something that I think is funny. What is the plot of Texas Chainsaw Massacre? You know, kids driving around Texas, and the evil family finds them and all hell breaks loose. What is House of a Thousand Corpses? Kids driving around Texas, the evil family finds them, all hell breaks loose. What is the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2? A relative of one of the victims, well, in this case, 2 of the victims, a relative of victims from the first movie who also happens to be in law enforcement, hunts down the evil family. What is the plot of Devil's Rejects? A relative of victims from the first movie who also happens to be in law enforcement hunts down the evil family. And in both movies, the law enforcement relative, starts losing his mind in the process, and the roles of good and evil don't switch. I'm not saying that, but the lines are kind of blurred. They're the same movie. As far as plot goes, Devil's Rejects is also just Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 2. But what Rob does in Devil's Rejects that Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 doesn't do is Rob makes us start to fall in love with the villains. You know, like I said, you're hanging out in the van with the Devil's Rejects talking about Tutti Frutti ice cream, you know. You want to see Baby get her fucking ice cream. You want to start cracking jokes with Captain Spaulding. It's probably his best writing. It really probably is the best example of Rob Zombie's writing. And that's a common complaint that people have with his movies, which I don't have that complaint, by the way. I have a kind of a slight theory as to what I think could improve his movies, but as far as his writing goes, and I'll get to this once I finish these movies. We'll get to, you know, I'm sure I'll have a little bit of a rant once I finish out the ranking. But yeah, this is his best written movie for sure. As far as storyline goes and like character arc goes and like the way it makes you feel. The Devil's Rejects, as much as I'm putting it in the fucking bitchin' category, this is honestly a movie that you can't recommend to just anybody. You know, it's not a good movie for like a date night. Imagine you're like on your fourth or fifth date with a girl. Or no, imagine you're going over to a girl's house for a movie night for the first time. You're not pulling out the Devil's Rejects. That's not a good idea. It is not a good idea. I actually almost made that mistake. I went over to a girl's house for the first time to watch a movie, and I brought over, I've got one of my DVDs. I think it's a DVD. One of my DVDs has House of a Thousand Corpses and Devil's Rejects on the same disc. I think that's what it was. But she didn't have the remote for her DVD player. So all we could do was put it in and push play. And it started on House of a Thousand Corpses. My original idea was to show her the Devil's Rejects. Now, looking back, I'm glad that I was not able to show her the Devil's Rejects because, you know, it's a heavy movie. It's a very heavy, dark movie. You can't just watch it anytime with anybody. That is the one thing, and that's not a flaw with the movie. Don't get me wrong. I'm not complaining about like the movie because of that. That's not a con. That's not a flaw of the film. But it's just a fact of the matter. This is not a great date night film to be busting out like that. Really, there's not much more you can say about The Devil's Rejects. It's just a great film. It's just his best. Well, no, I'm not saying it's his best film. I have another favorite movie of his that we're going to get to. But it's probably his best written movie for sure. You'd have to give him his kudos for his writing for sure on that. You know, a lot's been said about it. I'd probably like to do a full video on just this movie where, you know, where you run through the plot and everything. Probably would like to do that at some point. I guess I do have one complaint. My one complaint is the way that Tiny disappears for the whole movie and then just coincidentally shows back up at the end and saves the day. I'll throw that out there. I'll call that a complaint. I remember the very first time I ever watched this movie, I saw that and was kind of like, I don't really like that we just didn't see this guy for an hour and a half and now here he is saving the day. Like literally without Tiny, Baby would have died. Baby was dead. Baby was gonna die. And Tiny just kind of shows back up in the nick of time for the first time in an hour and a half. That's a complaint, but it's certainly not enough of a complaint to drop it down from the fucking bitchin' category. So, I guess, with that, let's just fucking move on to these last two. This is the one. This is the one that people will get on me the most for. This is the one that I certainly need to make a full video on. Because I would love to rage bait with this opinion. It's not rage bait. It is my genuine opinion. Not only do I place Halloween 2 in the fucking bitchin' category, but Rob Zombie's Halloween 2 is my favorite Halloween film of the entire Halloween franchise. Honest opinion. I like it better than the 1978 classic. I think Rob Zombie's Halloween 2 is perfect. I think it's a perfect movie. I think it's a genius movie. I love it. I fucking love it. I could watch it anytime. I've watched it so many times. I couldn't even tell you how many. I love this movie. I think it's a perfect movie. I think it's... You know, we have so many horror movies, sequels. We have so many horror sequels that it's basically a cliche now that you dive into the trauma of the survivors from the first movie. You see it a million times. You've seen it a million times. You've seen it in every horror franchise. Who survived the first movie? Let's get into the trauma. I think this movie does it the best. I think this movie does it the best, and it does it the most realistically. You look at like Halloween H2O. Oh, Laurie drinks wine. Laurie drinks a bit too much wine. Who gives a fuck? Laurie has nightmares and, you know, and she drinks a bit too much wine. Okay. I'd have nightmares and I drink too much wine. I like, what are you talking about? By the way, when I talk about Halloween 2, I'm talking about the director's cut. We should make that clear too. I'm talking about the director's cut. One of the biggest complaints I see with Halloween 2, the director's cut, is that Laurie is a bitch. Laurie is an insufferable bitch, and she's rude and she's mean. And to that I say, how the fuck would you behave if you were Laurie after Rob Zombie's Halloween 1? It's not pretty. It's not supposed to be pretty. It's only 2 years. I can't remember. I know for some odd reason the theatrical cut and the director's cut differ. One of them is 1 year after the first movie, and then the other one is 2 years after the first movie. I think the director's cut is... Let's see if I can find this really quick. The theatrical cut takes place 1 year after the incident. The director's cut takes place 2 years after. Okay, yeah. So the director's cut is 2 years. So we're only 2 years after the first movie. In a lot of these trauma sequels, you know, we're going like 10 to 20 years into the future. This is still very fresh. That's what I like about this. The trauma is still very fresh. It's only been 2 years. Laurie is still a drug addicted mess. She's addicted to her prescription. She's freaking out and yelling at her therapist. She's yelling at Annie. She's yelling at her friends. It's you know, I just like it. I like the portrayal. I like Scout Taylor Compton's Laurie in Halloween 2. She's you know, she's angry. She's angry, she's bitter, she's not happy. She's not handling it well. An even bigger cliche with the trauma horror movie sequels is that they're so strong, right? It's these strong women who survived the first movies. And don't get me wrong, I'm not complaining about strong women in movies. That's not what I'm saying at all. But in Halloween 2, Laurie is not strong. Laurie is abusing drugs and abusing alcohol. Like she's not doing well. And you don't see that very often, you know. You do, like I said, in like H2O, you get Laurie drinking wine and having nightmares and shit, and she's struggling. But the idea is still that she is strong and is handling this and, you know, comes through the other end all right. Halloween 2, Laurie is never really all right. She does not end up all right. She does not end up all right. She never does all right. It's a very realistic. I think we all like to think that survivors and traumatized people, they end up all right and strong, but I don't think a lot of them do. I think most people who survive things like Halloween 1 probably end up like Laurie Strode in Halloween 2. To me, that's the way it probably goes 7 or 8 times out of 10. And I like that we get a realistic depiction in this movie. Of course, Brad Dourif, perfect performance. You really feel for him. You really feel for him in this movie. He's really just trying to make shit work. He's really just trying to help out Laurie. He's really just trying to help out his daughter. And in the end, he pays the ultimate price. He is like... When I say the biggest loser of the movie, I don't mean he's like a loser. I mean, he loses everything. In that sense, he is the biggest loser of the movie. You feel terribly for Brad Dourif's character in this film. Danielle Harris as Annie Brackett. I think she does fantastic. You know, she's kind of the stronger version. She is the strong one, I would say, in this movie. You know, she is the one that seems to be coping a bit better than Laurie. She's doing a bit better. And I like seeing her and Laurie get into fights. You know, we see Annie and Laurie fighting constantly. They're not coming together. You know, I think in a Rainbows and Unicorns version of the story, they're best friends and they handle it together and they talk each other through hard moments. No, in this realistic depiction, they fight. They can't stand each other. They hate being around each other. They fight constantly. They love each other. They want to, they want to maintain their friendship, but a wedge has been driven between them. And I think, again, I just think that's a more realistic depiction. Michael's kills in this movie are some of my favorite kills in any Rob Zombie movie. I mean, the kill with the nurse, Nurse Daniels, Octavia Spencer. That's one of my favorite kills in all of horror. It's terrifying. It's terrifying. And even the way it's shot, the camera, you're kind of behind a window looking in through the blinds. So the whole time Michael is going to town on this nurse, you feel like you're hiding behind a window watching it. You're kind of thinking, oh God, I hope he doesn't turn around and see me. It feels like you're seeing this happen through a window, and you're anxious because you're worried that he might see you. He might turn around and start coming after you, and he might go to town on you. It's a very realistic, a very realistic stabbing. I think this is what would happen if a man the size of Tyler Mane, with a knife the size of the knife he has, got a hold of someone like Octavia Spencer. The grunting, that can't be overstated. I know a lot of people talk about Michael grunting in this movie. It's terrifying. It's terrifying. He's slamming a knife so hard into you that he's grunting. There's so much power in each and every stab, You got to think. I get a little bit too into this. You got to think. You think about, like, I don't know. You think about someone stabbing someone. You think at least half the times the knife's probably not going all the way into the body, right? The knife's probably going about halfway in. Dude, Tyler Mane's Michael Myers, the entire blade is going into your body. That's for sure. The entire blade, and probably like a quarter of the handle, is going into your body. You're getting all of that metal. You're getting all of that cold, hard metal blade into the body. It's crazy. It's very intense. It's one of my favorite kills in all of horror. I see a lot of people praising that. A lot of the defenders of this movie, they talk about that kill a lot, and it deserves it. It's a great kill. It's a great kill scene. Annie's death. Annie's death is very well done. We don't see anything. We don't need to see anything. It's Annie Brackett. It's Annie Brackett. The weight of it is felt. We don't need to see Annie Brackett being thrown around and ravaged like she obviously is. We just need to know what happened, and we see what happened. The ending, again, the director's cut. Now that I say that, though, man, I'm gonna feel real stupid about this one. Which one? What's the ending of the director's cut? Is the one where Laurie also dies, right? Did they go to the shed? Michael stabs Loomis. We will get to Loomis, don't worry. Yeah, no, I think the director's cut is the one where Laurie also gets shot. The police accidentally shoot her. The theatrical version is the one where Laurie stabs Michael. God, I hope I'm right about that. This is all stuff I need to do. Obviously, you see I'm doing this shit live. We're not editing this. I like live stuff. Alright, so get off my damn back. I like live action. Alright, here we go. We're looking. Yeah, Michael stabs Loomis. He says die. you know, I don't hate Michael yelling "die," but I can't, I won't defend it. I'm not die hard about it. You know, if you don't like that Michael says "die," that's fine. I'll let you have that opinion. Um, yeah, Laurie picks up Michael's knife, and then Sheriff Brackett says, "Don't shoot," and the police open fire. Okay, yeah. So the director's cut is the one where Laurie gets shot. I also like that ending scene because all the people die. It's a very Rob Zombie ending. Michael dies, Laurie dies, Loomis dies. These three people, the main characters, they all die. It's over. We're done. It's ended. So I was fine with that ending. Like I said, Michael saying die, whatever. I don't hate it. I don't love it. I don't care. If you hate it, that's fine. I'll let you have it. I won't argue with you. I see a lot of complaints about hobo Michael Myers. I love that Michael Myers. I love Michael Myers wandering around the back roads because this is real life. Again, this is realistic. Where else is, this is how it works. I also grew up in a small town and spent a lot of time in the back roads. That was kind of something that we did when we got cars. We drive around the back roads. So maybe that's why I like this. I like because I can very easily imagine a big man walking through just a field in the back roads. That is something that is not out of the realm of ordinary for me to see. So I thought that was a good, it's what's this guy been up to when he's not killing people? What's he doing? Doesn't anybody else wonder that? What is the killer doing when he's not killing? Where, how is he getting from place to place? Hey, he's just wandering around the back roads. Of course he has a long beard. Michael Myers isn't shaving. He's not stopping to shave. Of course he's dirty. He's not showering. It's realistic. You always have to commend Rob Zombie for that. He's given you realistic. He's given you something that is that's like, I don't want to say undeniable, but this is how Michael's getting from place to place. How else is he getting there? He's walking around the back roads. He's not going to walk through town. I'm sure people would see this giant fucking dirty man with a knife walking around. I don't think that would go so well. People complain about Sherry Moon Zombie as the ghost. And to me, that's the funniest part. Usually people that hate Sherry Moon Zombie, they bring her up in this movie and say, we didn't need to see her, blah, blah, blah. She's barely in this movie. The White Horse. People hate the White Horse. It's barely, it's not that much of a factor to me. I almost feel like you could, if you hate Sherry Moon and the White Horse that bad, if you were so inclined, every time they pop up on screen, you could hold your hand up over over the side of the screen that has them, and you wouldn't miss anything. You could probably fast forward past those parts and you'd still be fine. You'd still get the whole story. It's just a little bit more to Michael's motivation. That's all it is. You might not like it, but it's fine. I think it's fine. I guess it's kind of like Michael yelling "die." I'm not going to defend it with all of my might. If you hate it, fine. I don't understand why your hatred for it is so strong. It's not that prevalent, Michael's mom in Halloween 1, to backtrack a little bit, she's only in like the first third of the movie. That's what I always think is funny. If you really hate Sherry Moon Zombie that bad, Rob Zombie's Halloween movies should be your favorite Rob Zombie movies because she's barely in these movies. She's really not that significant in the movies. The most significant part about her is that she is kind of Michael's motive in Halloween 2. But all in all, her motive, or his motive, is really just getting to Laurie. It's you could watch these movies without paying attention to Sherry Moon Zombie, and you would be fine. If you are so inclined, just cover it up. Put a piece of paper over your TV screen when Sherry Moon and the horse show up, and you'll be fine. You'll get through it. You'll understand. I just think it's too good of a movie to let a white horse ruin it. It's too good of a film to let a horse who shows up for all of 5 minutes throughout the whole movie. It's too good to let that ruin it. I think it's a perfect film. I think it's a beautiful, wonderfully made movie. The scenes of Laurie hanging out with her friends, you know, it's a great movie. Dude, we get fucking Margot Kidder? Are you kidding me? Margot Kidder? We love Margot Kidder on this channel. All right. Let's get that straight. Here on Disco Acid Cult TV, we love Margot Kidder. All right, Black Christmas, it's a classic. You know, it's Margot Kidder as a therapist alone is enough to make Halloween 2 a great movie. So, I don't want to hear any more complaints. I don't want to hear it. This is the greatest Halloween film. It's the greatest Halloween film of the Halloween franchise. Look, it's the most unique Halloween movie while still being a Halloween movie. And what I mean by that is a Halloween movie is a Michael Myers and or Laurie Strode movie. That's what it is. Those are the main people in the Halloween franchise. That's what a Halloween film is. It's about Michael Myers and it's about Laurie Strode. Halloween 3 is obviously not an actual Halloween movie. It's a one-off, it's an outlier. The anthology idea didn't work out. So Halloween 3, it's Season of the Witch. That's what it is. Halloween Ends is not a Halloween movie. It's not a Michael or Laurie movie. It's a Corey and Allison movie with Michael and Laurie kind of pushed to the background, and then they get a little 1-minute fight later on. And that's Halloween Ends is terrible, first of all. Let me get that out of the way. Halloween Ends was god-awful. I hate Halloween Ends. But those are the 3 most unique movies of the franchise. Halloween 3, Halloween Ends, and Rob Zombie's Halloween 2. And Rob Zombie's Halloween 2 is the only one that meets the requirements of a Halloween film. It is a Laurie and Michael movie. Really, it's a Laurie movie. Halloween 2 is certainly a Laurie movie. Halloween 1, Rob Zombie's Halloween 1 is a Michael movie, and Rob Zombie's Halloween 2 is a Laurie movie. And I also like that he did that. Each character kind of gets their starring role in each movie. And to me, that's the biggest reason. That's the biggest reason it's great. It's the most unique Halloween film while still being a Halloween film. It does not lose sight of its main characters. It is focused on its main characters, and that's the best part about it. It's a great portrayal of Laurie's trauma. Now again, I have a lot to say about all of these movies that I have most certainly forgotten about. Like I said, I'm doing this all on the fly. I'm doing this all live. This is going to go up as soon as I'm done with it. There's no editing. This is just me fucking talking. But let's move to our last movie, which is obvious now. The last movie, my favorite, probably my favorite horror movie. Probably my favorite horror film altogether. Well, let me explain, because I kind of cheat when it comes to the subject of my favorite horror film. My personal favorite horror film is House of a Thousand Corpses. The movie that I consider to be the objective greatest horror film of all time is the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And then the movie that I consider to be the scariest movie of all time, like the movie that personally scares me the most, well, maybe the only movie that scares me, is a movie called Skinamarink. A lot of people also hate Skinamarink. A little side tangent here, I guess. We'll move away from Rob Zombie for a quick minute while I explain just that one. To me, I don't use the word scary to describe horror films. Horror films are not scary because I'm an adult and I know that they're movies. So I know that they're not real. I know there's nothing to be scared of. To me, when it comes to horror movies, I'm looking for feelings of dread. I'm looking for feelings of hopelessness. I'm looking to be made uncomfortable. Those are the things I'm looking for in horror movies. Skinamarink is the one movie that has actually really kind of frightened me. I'm afraid of the dark. I'm a grown man who's scared of the dark. Skinamarink kind of reawakens that fear. When I watch Skinamarink, I won't go downstairs for a snack at 1 in the morning because I'm afraid of going downstairs in my house in the dark. So that's what I'm saying when I talk about the scariest movie. Texas Chainsaw Massacre, again, would love to make a video about that. To me, it's just clear, far and away, the greatest horror film ever made. It'll never be beat. It will always be the greatest horror film of all time. It's a perfect movie. It's a perfectly made film. Now, my personal favorite horror movie, House of a Thousand Corpses. What I mostly mean by that is this is my comfort film. And let me just say, I was using that term before any of you did, I promise. I was calling this movie my comfort movie since before I even ever heard the word. This movie is my comfort movie so much that years ago I used to work at a grocery store. I used to stock shelves at a grocery store. And at that job, I was allowed to put in one earbud. So I'd put my AirPod in my left ear, and I would play something on my phone in my pocket while I was working. Many shifts, I would just play House of a Thousand Corpses on my phone in my left ear, in my pocket, phone in the pocket. No, I'm not watching it, it's just listening to the movie. There are shifts that I would listen to this movie 3 times in a row. It just something about this movie makes me feel very cozy. I think that's the word. It's a cozy movie. First of all, I love either single setting films or films with very few settings or locations, and most of this movie happens at the house. The fact that most of the movie happens at night, I think also adds to the coziness of it. You kind of feel like you're in the car with these kids in the dark, driving around in the rain, and just a very warm feeling accompanies me when I watch this movie. To me, this movie, one of the most unique things about House of a Thousand Corpses is it's the way that this movie is somehow, it walks this line perfectly. When it comes to horror movies, there's kind of 2 kinds of horror movies. There's horror movies that are gritty and violent and uncomfortable, and then there's horror movies that are fun and entertaining and sometimes a little happy ending-ish. And this movie is kind of both. It's somehow kind of both. It is very Rob Zombie gritty and violent and vulgar, but it's also kind of fun. It's bright, it's colorful, it's quirky, it's kind of cheery. As opposed to The Devil's Rejects, you could watch House of a Thousand Corpses on a date with a girl. You could go over to a new girlfriend's house for your first movie night and bring House of a Thousand Corpses, and it would probably be fine. She'd probably be okay with it. You probably wouldn't scare her off immediately. I think the amateur, I think the fact that it was his first movie adds a lot to this movie. The fact that he didn't really know what to do. In the 20-year director's commentary, he talks about how his biggest fear with this movie was people being afraid. Not people being afraid. His biggest fear was people being bored while watching the movie. And so because of that, he kind of just stuffed as much shit as he could think of on the screen. So that's why you get, the house is so full of Halloween decorations and it's so bright and colorful, and you get these crazy edits. Like there's in the scene where Otis and Tiny are attacking them for the first time, they jump off they're scarecrows and they jump off the poles and they actually abduct the kids. When the 2 girls are in the car, one of them goes to lock the door and you get this really kind of silly jump cut. It's like her hand reaching for the lock on the door, and it cuts to the same shot of her hand like 2 or 3 times, and it's very pointless. But that's a very good representation, in my opinion, of the kind of quirkiness and amateurishness of this movie. And when I say amateurishness, I mean that in a good way. It's very endearing that it's Rob Zombie's first movie. It's kind of it kind of works out to his benefit. It's kind of just Rob Zombie vomiting on film, and then like, and you just get that. And because Rob Zombie is cool and has great taste, it came out to be a pretty cool movie. To me, it's the most Rob Zombie movie out of his filmography. I have a kind of a joke scenario in my head where, let's say, again, I'm dating a new girl, I have a new girlfriend, and I'm showing her things that I'm into. Let's say for 1 month, I show her all of Rob Zombie's music and music videos, right? That's all. Just here's Rob Zombie's music, here's his music videos, here's his aesthetic, here's what he looks like, here's the stuff he does, here's his artwork. And then the next month you cut her off. No more Rob Zombie. Nothing to do with Rob Zombie. Then the next month, let's say you're having a movie night and you pull up House of a Thousand Corpses. And let's say for some reason she goes to the bathroom during the opening credits when it says directed by Rob Zombie. At some point in the movie, I feel like she would be able to tell. She might say, is this that Rob Zombie guy that you were showing me like 2 months ago? Because the movie is just so fucking Rob Zombie. That's, maybe I sound like I'm rambling and I'm just like saying shit, but in my mind that makes sense. It's out of all of his filmography, House of a Thousand Corpses is the most obviously made by Rob Zombie. It's the one film that I wish that we got a documentary. I mentioned earlier, his 3 films that don't have documentaries are the ones that would be the most interesting to watch. Lords of Salem, I forgot to mention it in Halloween 2, but in Halloween 2, I would have loved to see a documentary about that. I know there's a story that Bill Moseley was supposed to be in Halloween 2, but the production was just such a nightmare that Bill Moseley walked away from it. I've heard on a podcast called The Offering with Jerry Horror. There's a shout out, The Offering with Jerry Horror. This will get him absolutely no clout or clicks because I have absolutely no clout or clicks, but I love that guy. I love his podcast. So anybody who happens to see this that hasn't heard of him, go find him. I find him on Apple Podcasts. I think you can find him anywhere where podcasts are found. But I've heard it, and I've heard it from other people, but the first person I heard it from was Jerry Horror on The Offering. He does an episode on Halloween too. Much respect to Jerry Horror for covering Rob Zombie's Halloween 2 and putting some respect on that movie's name. He talks about how apparently there was a documentary that was made of the movie, and it showed how bad of a nightmare the production was, and the Weinsteins had it buried. They saw it and said, this is not going to make us look good, so we're not releasing this, we're not putting this out. So if it's not already destroyed, then I would assume that somewhere in a vault somewhere is the documentary of the making of Rob Zombie's Halloween 2. I would be very interested to see that. We will never see it, but I would love to. And yeah, the other movie is House of a Thousand Corpses. We have some, short little clips and whatnot. If you have any of the 20-year anniversary releases, there's a couple like little, clips and videos of them shooting the movie and whatnot, but there's no real documentary like there is for most of his movies. And that I would have loved to see. I would love to see Rob Zombie walking onto set, having no idea what he's doing, having no idea, who to go talk to for the situation, who to go talk to get that done. I think that would have been very interesting. I think, artistically, I talked about the set design a little bit. The set, it's just such a good looking fucking movie. It's such a quirky movie. I gotta say, I have a complaint about the classification of the movie, even on the Wikipedia page. By the way, let me pull that up. The Wikipedia page classifies House of a Thousand Corpses as a black comedy horror film, and I disagree with that completely. I disagree with that so strongly. It's not a black comedy. It's not a horror comedy. It's a horror movie where some of the characters make jokes. You know, some of the characters have lighthearted moments. That doesn't make it a comedy. You know, the protagonists, they're all young adults. Of course, they're going to make jokes and bullshit with each other. That's typically the kind of conversation you're going to hear when you're in a car with four young adults. They're bullshitting. They're making jokes. They're saying funny stuff. Captain Spaulding, he's just a guy with a sense of humor. Otis Driftwood, he's just a quirky guy who does some things that are kind of funny sometimes, or says, you know, they're a family. All families get into like funny arguments and are quirky. It's not a comedy. It's not a black comedy. It's not a horror comedy. It's a horror movie. And there are some moments that are lighthearted between certain characters. I like how I kind of imagine that Rob was kind of influenced by Quentin Tarantino. You know, this movie comes out in 2003, but he made this movie, I think, in 2000. Production might have started in 1999, but I know most of it, I think, was made in like 2000. So this is right after Quentin Tarantino hits it big, you know, with Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction. And Quentin Tarantino kind of, in my opinion, is the guy who really made famous the writing technique of having characters talk about just kind of random bullshit. You know, it's really the main guy that I think of when it comes to that kind of dialogue, you know, characters who are on their way to kill somebody and they're talking about burgers. They're talking about McDonald's in another continent, you know, things like that. And I would imagine, like I said, I would imagine, I don't know, but I would imagine Rob might have been influenced by that a little bit, because we get, you know, the very opening scene, Captain Spaulding and Stucky are just sitting around, you know, they're just sitting around bullshitting. They're not talking about killing people. They're not talking about anything that we're going to see in the movie. They're talking about hanging out down at Molly's fruit stand. And I like Rob Zombie's version of that. I like when Rob Zombie's characters talk about just, you know, just normal life, just real life. It's, I like his writing. A lot of people don't like his writing. I guess from here on out, I'm going to move into kind of just all of Rob Zombie's filmography, right? I'm gonna talk about, I'm just going to start firing shit off at this point, as if that's not already what I've been doing. But look, I like Rob Zombie's writing a lot. A lot of people complain about the cussing. I like it. I like the vulgarity. I cuss that much. I've been trying not to on this video, but I cuss that much. People are always like, no one actually cusses that much. Yes, there are certainly people who say fuck every other sentence. I promise. And I bet a lot of these people that complain about it are some of those people too. But look, I like his writing. To me, one of the things that Rob Zombie could benefit from is if he had somebody who helped him with the stories. So, you know, you see those movies where the credits will say, story is by guy A and guy B, and then it'll say written by guy A. To me, Rob Zombie could benefit from a guy B. You know, he maybe that's just a guy who hangs out with him and comes up with stories with him. Because a lot of his stories are, you know, not the most clever. Like Lords of Salem and 31 are two of his most original stories. And what I mean by that is House of a Thousand Corpses. The story is obviously just the story of Texas Chainsaw Massacre. The Devil's Rejects, the story is just the Texas Chainsaw Massacre too. Halloween, obviously, is just the original Halloween. Halloween 2 is, you know, definitely an original Rob Zombie story, but it's still based on characters from the Halloween franchise, and it's coming as a sequel to his first Halloween, which comes from the original Halloween. The Lords of Salem is entirely original. It is entirely from Rob Zombie. And the story's not that great. It's a story about a haunted record that shows up out of nowhere. And even then, it's kind of taken from the Salem witch trials. 31 is completely originally Rob Zombie. 31. The story is very, I mean, pretty much non-existent. It's basically House of a Thousand Corpses, just with multiple clowns and carnies, you know? So that is one thing I will say. If Rob Zombie could benefit from anything, it's a guy that could help him with the stories. That's all he needs. I like his writing. I'm a big fan of his writing. And I think The Devil's Rejects proves that he's a good writer. And I think when it comes to dialogue, we'll get back to House of a Thousand Corpses and Captain Spaulding's conversation with Stucky and, some of the dialogue between the family. I think his dialogue is a lot of the best part of his writing. I already forgot that I mentioned earlier. One of my my hot takes on House of a Thousand Corpses is that Karen Black is the star of the movie. Yeah, I think Karen Black is the star of the movie. I know there's not actually one star. The family is kind of as a whole the main star. Really, Rob Zombie is the star of House of a Thousand Corpses. I remember there was an interview with Bill Moseley where he talked about how it was kind of nice that Rob Zombie had such a name already because he was able to cast whoever he wanted. He could have cast an entire film of unknown actors. I mean, Sherry Moon was an unknown actor, technically. But because it was directed by Rob Zombie, that alone was the star of the movie. So he was kind of able to cast whoever he wanted. And of course, he casted some pretty iconic horror actors like Bill Moseley and Sid Haig, and Karen Black has certainly done her I think what was she in Burnt Offerings? Karen Black had been around the block in terms of horror before. And yeah, Karen Black, once you get to the house, that's my thing. Once you get to the house, it becomes the Karen Black show, right? Once the kids get to the house and Karen Black steps on screen for the first time, I think it kind of becomes her movie. At least up until the very end with the Dr. Satan stuff. Realistically, Dr. Satan is the main antagonist of this film. He is the big bad guy of the movie. We just see him so little that a lot of people think that, they consider the family to be the main antagonist of the film. Which, if you're going by screen time, then sure they are, but Dr. Satan is really technically the main antagonist. But yeah, Karen Black, she just eats this movie for fucking breakfast. Yeah, Karen Black is incredible in this movie. It was a real big bummer. Well, you know what? No, I'm already going to take that back. I was going to say it's a real big bummer that we didn't see her in The Devil's Rejects. It's a bummer that she wasn't in it, of course, and they had a contract negotiation that didn't work out. But I almost think Karen Black wouldn't have fit in The Devil's Rejects. The Devil's Rejects, obviously is very dirty and gritty and violent. I think I'm going to go ahead and... you guys see the ranking? Obviously, this is the ranking. I'm going to go ahead and bring myself up back to screen here in the middle of this rant because I don't need to be sitting here anymore with the screen like that. I'll bring it back up before we end the video. What I'm saying, though, is that, I don't think Karen Black would have worked in The Devil's Rejects. Leslie Easterbrook really did a better... Karen Black as Mother Firefly, she's kind of graceful. Of course, she's still dirty and she's got the yellow teeth, but, she wears the kind of the flowy dress or whatever it is that she's wearing, and she's kind of... You know what I'm trying to say. Graceful is really the only word I can think of at the moment. She's kind of elegant, I think might be another word you'd want to use. Basically, in the scene in The Devil's Rejects where Leslie Easterbrook is being interrogated by the cops and she starts, screaming and freaking out, I couldn't imagine Karen Black doing that scene. I could only imagine Leslie Easterbrook doing that scene. So I think it almost kind of works out for the best that Karen Black wasn't able to do The Devil's Rejects. But as far as House of a Thousand Corpses go, yeah, I always argue that Karen Black is the star of that movie. Sherry Moon Zombie does an incredible job for her first film. I think even people that hate her could acknowledge that. She was born to play Baby Firefly in House of a Thousand Corpses. That laugh is, of course, fantastic. Bill Moseley, as much as I love Bill Moseley in House of a Thousand Corpses, I think Otis Driftwood hits his prime in The Devil's Rejects. However, I still love him in House of a Thousand Corpses. But Otis in Devil's Rejects is the prime Otis, with the beard. He's constantly angry. That's the arc that I mentioned earlier, too. Otis's arc, right? In House of a Thousand Corpses, you have Otis. He's kind of loony. He's kind of quirky. He's kind of crazy because he's at home and he's making art. He is in House of a Thousand Corpses. I think of Otis as like the teenager. He's like the teenage son. In the dinner scene when Otis comes downstairs and Karen Black is like, "Oh, I'm glad you finally decided to join us for dinner." I don't know if she says finally, but the way she says it kind of makes it sound like he doesn't always come downstairs for dinner. So I imagine he's kind of the edgy teenage boy that stays upstairs a lot and doesn't really leave his room. That's Otis in House of a Thousand Corpses. Then in Devil's Rejects, he's on the run. It becomes very serious business. He's not trying to get in trouble. So he's angry the whole movie. He's not trying to fuck up. And then, like I said, in Three from Hell, he calms down a bit because he's already done his time in prison. He's hardened. It's hard to stress him out at that point. Captain Spaulding in House of a Thousand Corpses obviously is somehow like the most famous character, but is like the least on screen out of the whole family. I almost think that worked out in his favor. It kind of made him like an attraction. You were very curious to see more of him. Captain Spaulding is also definitely Rob Zombie's most marketable character out of all of his filmography. He is the most marketable character. You see him on most of the merch. He's got the face. He's got the red, white, and blue. He's got the costume. My personal favorite look from any of his filmography is Otis Driftwood when he puts on the Halloween costume in House of a Thousand Corpses, the white and black face paint. That's my favorite. If you can ever get me a shirt or a piece of merchandise with that face on it, I want it. Otis in the red robe with the painted face. I really like RJ. I think RJ was a good character. I was bummed out to see him killed off so soon in Devil's Rejects, but it needed to happen. Him and Tiny, it's funny because I said this before I even heard Rob Zombie say it. I don't remember if he said it in the 20-year anniversary director's commentary or if he said it in an interview, but he talks about how when he looks back on House of a Thousand Corpses and sees all the mistakes he made as a beginner, one of them was he thinks that he could have just made Tiny and RJ one character. They could have just been, pushed together into one character, which I always used to say too. It seems like he, you just need one heavy. He basically made two heavies, two big guys, which I was fine with. I liked. Tiny is definitely like the Leatherface of the family. RJ is also kind of like the Leatherface, but a little bit more competent. Like he can drive cars and, he operates the tow truck and fixes the car for the kids. So I think RJ was necessary in House of a Thousand Corpses. If anything, maybe Tiny was the least necessary. But at the same time, you still love Tiny. He becomes a big part of the plot when we get to Mother explaining his origins and whatnot. I need to write out a video. I need to write out a video on House of a Thousand Corpses because I have a million thoughts on it that run through my head every time I bring it up or every time I watch it or think about it. And then as soon as I turn on this camera, I pretty much forget everything and I start ranting like I've been doing. I think this video has been going for almost 2 hours now. And a lot of what I'm saying has probably been kind of all over the place. If you've been here this long, you are a champion. And I appreciate it. And I hope you argue with me in the comments. Friendly, kindly, of course. You know what I'm trying to say. Yeah, let me pull this back up. We'll pull the ranking back up. This is my Rob Zombie ranking. This is also my in order from least to best. 31 is my least favorite. The Munsters is second from the bottom. Then we go Three from Hell. Then we go Lords of Salem. Then we go Halloween. then we go Devil's Rejects, then we go Halloween 2, then we go House of a Thousand Corpses. That's also a take that people might think is crazy, that I like Halloween 2 better than Devil's Rejects. Keep in mind, that's also one of those things that will change from day to day. You know, if I finish this video and I watch the Devil's Rejects right now, I'll probably tell you that Devil's Rejects is, you know, my second favorite movie. But as of right now, my second favorite movie is Halloween 2. I just really love Halloween 2. But House of a Thousand Corpses, man, it's a perfect movie. It's a perfect movie because of its flaws. That's kind of the thing. It's a perfect movie because of how rookie Rob Zombie was at the time. It's kind of one of those lightning in a bottle, accidental miracles kind of thing is what I would say. There's no reason it should be as good as it is. But I think it's a great film. I think it's a perfect horror film. I think it's everything that I want in a horror film, you know. It's just well done. So I guess that's it. I guess I really just came here to rank these. I went off on a good couple rants, a good couple tangents. I ranked these, and yeah, fucking A. Like I said, I should make some full videos. I will make some full videos eventually. I'm working on another video right now that's not Rob Zombie, but a different movie. And yeah, the video I want to make most is the Halloween 2. Rob Zombie's Halloween 2 is my favorite Halloween movie. I already love picturing that as like the title of a video. Rob Zombie's Halloween 2 is the greatest Halloween film of the franchise. 100% rage bait, but also 100% my actual opinion. So I do want to make some Rob Zombie videos in the future. I just wanted to fire this one off just to get a bunch of ranting out. But I'll get into more ranting eventually. You know, like I have a big rant on the fact that, you know, like I talked about the big fat bold line in the middle of his filmography, you know, between Halloween 2 and Lords of Salem. You know, to me, it seems obvious that his priorities changed after Halloween 2 and his aspirations changed, and, you know, the kind of movies he wanted to make changed. And it's sad. It's kind of sad. At the same time, I don't like to think of his career going downhill in the second half. I just, like I said, I think his aspirations and his motivations changed. That's the way I would put it. But I certainly do want to make a video just kind of talking about the entire filmography, not in a ranking format, just in, you know, going movie by movie. I don't know. Again, I'm ranting. What I'm saying is, yeah, if you've been here, thanks for watching Disco Acid Cult TV. I really don't want to be the fucking like and subscribe guy, but I guess I have to. I'm still pretty new here. I've mostly just been doing live streams. Fucking just subscribe to just get it over with. Just fucking hit the button. Don't turn on notifications. I'll tell you that, right? Subscribe. Do me the favor. I will not harass you about the notifications. I don't give a fuck. Just subscribe. Just do me that one solid. Never watch a video again. I don't fucking care. Just get the subscriber number up. That's all I want. I just want to be able to show my ex-girlfriends that I have a bunch of subscribers. That's what really matters. That's what really matters here. So again, thanks for watching. Argue with me in the comments. And yeah, fucking A, man. I'll see you guys around.
And we're all here today to groove and have a beautiful time together, and that it's only the beginning. Sometimes I think I'm drunk and then I realize I am drunk. Sometimes I think I'm drunk and then I